Okay, it's 10 o'clock Pacific time. We're going to get rolling. Susie, thanks for the background music as people are rolling in here. Welcome to today's webinar. This is a webinar we put together on our What People Want from Work survey, so we'll get into it. This will be on demand for you too. So this presentation will probably be about 45 minutes to an hour. We're just reserving a lot of time for Q&A at the very end. So Susie will walk us through a lot of the data. I'll add some commentary here and there. And then we'll leave a lot of time for questions if you have those at the end. So I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the entire session. Use the Q&A function for questions that you have, and feel free to use the chat if you just want to add commentary or something throughout the session. Love the engagement from people, so make sure to do that. These slides and recording are always available. So these live sessions, we'd love to put them on, and as people register and attend, they can get it. Following the session, they can always find it on our website as well. So you can go back and look at all the sessions that we put together over the years. Those are always available to you for free, and you're welcome to share with your team as well. Make sure to go to xeniumhr.com, and we have tons of events coming up. We're about to publish our 2024 workshop schedule, so that's going to be exciting. Susie's built a really good curriculum for that. Like I said, we have tons of webinars, we've got podcasts, we've got micro learning, e-learning, you name it. So go to xeniumhr.com. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. All right, let's get into it. So Suzi Wear is our speaker for today. She's our VP of People Development and Culture at Xenium. She leads our curriculum. She's built out a great workshop schedule. She's developed a ton of e-learning courses, and she does a lot of micro learning. So we're very lucky to have her. And I'm Brandon Laws, the Senior Director of Marketing and Product at Xenium. I moderate all of the webinars that we do for free. I host a podcast for Xenium, and you'll probably see me on lots of other content as well. So let's get into it. Susie, what is this survey all about?
Well, glad to be here. First of all, Brandon, and I always like talking about the employee experience and how we as employers can enhance that employee experience because we know that it leads to better results for our organizations. This particular survey, called the What People Want from Work survey, was developed by us, Xenium, in 2016. And it was intended to provide employers with an opportunity to understand what their employees value, the top reasons why their employees stay with their organization, and also an opportunity to see how they as employers stack up against other employers. And most of the participants of our survey have been small to medium-sized employers, but they do vary greatly in terms of industry and type of organization. And we'll get into that in a little bit. There are 32 questions, so it is a fairly comprehensive survey, but it covers a lot of ground. And you can see the topics here cover leadership, workplace culture, the direct supervisor support that employees are receiving, compensation and benefits, training and development opportunities, work environment and resources, and then also diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've also added a question around sustainability as well. So there are, in addition to the ranking or rating type questions that provide some quantitative results, there are a couple of qualitative questions. So open-ended questions that have verbatim responses, as well as what we refer to as our ENPS question, in Employer Net Promoter Score. And similar to what you might find with NPS for your business, it's asking employees if, asked by a friend, would you recommend your employer as a great place to work? So employers who opt into this survey that we offer every year, usually it's around late summer, early fall, they will receive input from their employees, which can serve as a benchmark. And also they can utilize on an ongoing basis to evaluate whether their HR and people initiatives that they implement are driving and getting the results that they want.
Yeah, the thing I'd add to this too is it's free. I don't know if you mentioned that. So
Yes.
whether you're a client or not a client of Xenium, this is a free engagement survey that we offer every year around the summer into fall time, and you get a free report in the end. So we do all the analysis, and it's standardized year over year. So what's great is if you participate year after year, you get to see like your trends, and so if you keep that data, you can stack it up next to each other and see like how you're doing. So we'll get into this.
So first we'll cover some demographic data for our survey. This year we had 1,426 employees respond. So, a little over 1,400 employees are providing information here in this survey. And you can see there is a mix of supervisor, manager level versus non-supervisory employees participating, definitely heavier on non-supervisory. So 917 non-supervisory employees and 306 supervisor or manager level employees participated. There were a few executive and director level folks as well. And then the 26 that's associated with didn't respond, those individuals just didn't note what their role was when participating in the survey. We've also broken it down by gender. And this is interesting. We see this consistent theme year after year, definitely a heavier response with female gender as opposed to male or other, including non-binary gender respondents. So I haven't really delved into further research or maybe the psychology around that. I know that employers have probably a little bit more than even mix when we look at that population of over 1,400 employees, but maybe more females are inclined to respond to surveys. I don't know. So that might be something to look in further, but nonetheless, here are the respondent demographics for the survey. Also, we looked at age. So there was the option for respondents to note their age, range, and their race, ethnicity. This is helpful just for us as we're looking at the population results of the survey to see if there tend to be any trends or themes as it relates to age or generations, as well as how people who, especially BIPOC or non-white employees are feeling, if there are disparities between their experience as opposed to the more dominant groups. So industry wide, there are quite a few types of employers listed here, and there's the breakdown of the number of organizations that fall into these industry categories, as well as the employer size. So you can see the top three make up a good chunk, or I should say 22 employees in small organizations, 18 organizations with 11 to 20 employees, and 38 organizations with 21 to 50 employees. So as I mentioned earlier, the population is definitely weighted towards more small employers. And then there were a few medium-sized organizations who had employees who participated. But certainly a broad variety of industries represented. So this is where we get into the actual data of the survey. And the first section of the survey has questions relating to how would you rate your current employer in various categories. And the categories here are listed. And in addition to asking how you as an employee rate your employer in these areas, there's also a question for each about what's the level of importance or value to you. So this is helpful when you're looking at, okay, how do you rate as an employer? And also how important is this aspect of employment to your employees. And where there are the biggest deltas or differences, so to speak, those might be opportunities to prioritize your HR people initiatives. So you can see the categories listed to the left of this screen: company leadership, supervisor communication and support, collaboration, and so forth. Under each of those, there are questions. So for example, under company leadership, the questions were statements that the employees were able to rate their employer on were: the organization has a clear mission and goals. Company leaders listen to, respect, and value employees. And leadership communication is authentic and transparent. So those are examples of statements for which employees were able to rate their employer. Another example of types of questions under compensation are, my wage or salary is fair and equitable. Employees are rewarded for high performance. And my compensation motivates me to perform at a high level. So employers are able to see their scores for each of these categories based on those types of questions. And I think you can look at these population results here and see that there are, thanks, Brandon. Something that kind of stands out is, for example, compensation, the average employer rating. So when we're looking at the total population of employees from all organizations who participated, that average employer rating under compensation was 3.37 out of 5. So the scale was 1 to 5, 1 being lowest, 5 being the highest. 3.37, which is the lowest out of this list for compensation. And yet the importance rating was one of the highest at 4.18. So that represents maybe the biggest difference between what employees value and how they feel their current compensation is. So it's definitely something to make note of as an employer and look into further.
Yeah, when we send out these reports to the participating companies, we always say, like, hey, go look at like the top 3 that have the biggest delta between rating and importance, and really start there, because it gets overwhelming when you try to really tackle all these things at once. But if you can look at like what are the biggest differences, like people are saying this is really important and it's the lowest score, let's address that first.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the reports that Brandon's team produces is the graphics are pretty easy to see the differences, the disparities in those 2 questions or those 2 areas. We'll talk a little bit more about these results in our next slide here. So when we asked employees to really, it was a forced ranking question where we provided 18 different motivating factors in employment, and we asked them to force rank in order from most important to least important in terms of their motivation and satisfaction. Here's how those results shook out. So most important, compensation, including benefits, in terms of being a top motivating factor and employment satisfaction factor for employees. Second was,
sorry about this.
That's okay.
I'm noticing an error here, so we're gonna have to verbally explain what these are.
Second was flexibility, and that was 490 votes, and you'll see more of this content on following slides. And then lastly was positive relationships with 418. So top 3 factors: compensation and benefits, flexibility, and then also positive relationships. So, out of the 8 years that we've been doing this survey, compensation is always at the top. Similarly, we see people rating their employer fairly low in terms of compensation. This is a natural theme. And it doesn't always necessarily mean that employers are not compensating competitively or fairly. but it is something to look into. Um, it's a concern for employees, especially today. Compensation is a top priority. It's always been one of the top motivating factors, as I mentioned. However, the importance to employees has seemed to increase a little bit over the last couple of years. And I think, this is indicative of wage growth, inflation, especially for lower earning workers. And we've had, at least over the last 1 to 2 years, coming out of the pandemic, a tight labor market and demand for talent. So there have been a lot of people switching jobs, being able to get higher compensation at other employers. And that's definitely put some pressure on employers. Additionally, about compensation, the heightened awareness of pay equity and transparency, employees really want to understand how their compensation is determined and feel like, okay, I know I'm being paid fairly, especially as compared to my peers. If they don't believe that their compensation is fair, and in their health benefits, for example, are not affordable, then other motivating factors such as flexibility, positive relationships, autonomy, those become less important. So think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I don't feel like I can meet my basic needs, or I'm not being paid or treated fairly, then it's really hard to get excited or be motivated in other ways. So still a hot topic, compensation is, as well as flexible work. So flexible work has been, a priority and a need for all ages of employees over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, but become increasingly valued and even expected in many industries by employers or employees. So considering other types of flexibility in terms of work schedule and arrangements can be helpful. And then lastly, that other third top factor was positive relationships. And, as humans, we need to connect with other people to be fulfilled and also successful. And there is still that desire for having both flexibility, but also the ability to connect with and collaborate with other people at work. So the slide that Brandon has up now kind of takes it down another level to the next highest motivating factors. So the top three by a pretty big margin were compensation, flexibility, and positive relationships. But if we're taking it down another level, the next set of top ranked motivating factors for 2023 include making a difference, interesting work, autonomy, personal development and growth, and job security. So job security, interestingly, has not been on this top, 8 list of motivating factors for a few years now. So I think that might be a sign that people are really seeking stability. And that may be related to the job market softening, the economy, inflation, those types of things as well. So as compared to the past couple years, job security is now in the top 8 list. While these motivating factors receive less than half of the votes as compared to the top 3, they're definitely still worth examining. Most of these are influenced by leadership communication and practices. So some questions for employers to consider, maybe 1, are you communicating the impact your people make? So how does what they do in their individual role make a difference or have an impact to the business, the organization's mission, or to the community, or even world for that matter? That's providing that meaning in work that is motivating to people. Another question to reflect on might be, are you helping your people understand how their unique contributions contribute to the organization's success? Are they able to do work that is aligned with their strengths? Do they feel fully utilized for their strengths? That can tap into that interesting work. Are they provided opportunities to learn and try new and different things? That lends to both interesting work and also personal development and growth. And do your employees know that you trust them to take ownership and an initiative in their roles? So, employees are wanting autonomy, and that comes from trust from leaders. And, those are good conversations to have to understand whether employees are feeling equipped and empowered to meet the expectations of their job. And then lastly, a question to delve deeper into, maybe, do employees have regular opportunities to learn? And do they see a path forward for growth? So it's one thing to say, hey, we offer growth opportunities, but if there's no visibility or there are no conversations happening with employees, then, that may not really be a reality for them. And if they are not feeling supported, engaged, and trusted, and also that there are some clear career pathing options within the organization, they are more inclined to start looking elsewhere. So here is a list of all those motivating factors. So, these are factors that we have determined through the course of our consulting work and experience to be engagement related and also contribute to job satisfaction. And employees were asked to force rank them in order of importance, and you can clearly see how things shook out. As we discussed, compensation, clearly a leader in that list. Flexible schedule or flexibility in terms of job arrangement is second, and positive relationships is third. And then, as we discussed, making a difference, interesting work, autonomy, personal development and growth, and job security were shortly following those. And there are the other items here, which, this is the total population results. Employers may have a totally different result. So individual employers may see that, maybe personal development, growth, or team collaboration are higher on the list. Or maybe, compensation is number 2 or number 3 on that top 3 list. So that's the value of having your own individual employee groups results so that you can cater your follow-up specifically for your organization.
So a quick clarification, we actually don't have them forced rank. They actually choose 3. So like if I'm taking the survey, I choose 3 out of this list. So it actually makes it more interesting that we've had those top 3 almost every single year, because out of a whole entire list, people are selecting those the most by a wide margin too.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I thought they could click on the other
we had played around with that, but then we were like, no, let's really get to the heart of what's most important, and that's why we came up with just 3 check boxes.
Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, so employees are having to choose. If you had to pick 3 of these that you have to have in your work in order to feel motivated, engaged, and want to stay with your employer, right? These are like the deal breakers, so to speak. What would those 3 factors be?
Yeah. And what's interesting, because I've done a lot of the individual reports, so we're looking at the population here, but when I see company to company, these vary a lot, because you might have like a nonprofit where they're so mission and values aligned because they're constantly reinstating their mission. That tends to be like the top, is along with making a difference. So it varies by company, and that's why it's really valuable to do this as an individual, as well as, like you're coming to this webinar to get the population data, but actually participating yourself, it's pretty worthwhile.
Yeah, and honestly, that's why we created the survey. It was really more of individual employer benefit as opposed to a marketing tool. It ended up being an interesting tool for marketing, such as this webinar, right? Sharing this type of information. But the motivation behind it was, how can we really provide a valuable survey to help employers understand what their value proposition is, what their unique demographic needs to be happy and successful, and then what steps can they take to actually improve their employee experience and their retention. And Xenium, we're an employer as well, we use this survey. This is our annual engagement survey. We also do some smaller pulse checks to gauge engagement throughout the year, but we've utilized this survey for our own internal HR and people initiatives as well. Okay, so here you can see those top 3 motivating factors. We've broken them out by age just to see, hey, you know, are there generational differences
Yeah, it's the
in
same.
terms of what is most important? And according to our survey, at least, there isn't. Still pretty consistent regardless of age. Also, since 2018, you can see that these top 3 factors have been consistent as most important to employees. So we have seen them move around in order between first, second, and third place, but compensation, including benefits, flexibility, and positive relationships have consistently been the top 3 in our total survey population results over the last 5 or more years. Here is the E, or employer net promoter score question, and it's on a 4-star rating scale. So people were asked, how likely are you to recommend your workplace as a good place to work? And 1 star would be not very likely. And 4 stars would be a definitive yes. And so pretty high number as an average score for the survey population, 3.46 out of 4 stars. So it's a good sign. We also looked at, okay, are people rating their employer higher based on their work arrangement? And this was interesting. You can see the number of respondents that we have. On-site employees, those are folks that don't have a work from home or telecommuting arrangement. Hybrid are folks who, as many of you know, have the flexibility to work on site or from home, and then fully remote. And you can see the number of respondents distribution in each of those categories, and then the associated eNPS scores. So interestingly, it's not by a huge margin, but the people who have the more flexible arrangements had a little bit of a higher eNPS score. Probably not significant enough to say, oh, that there is a correlation there, but interesting to look at. It will vary by organization too, I'm sure. So historical data for the eNPS score, you can see over the years, we went back to 2018. It was pretty low in 2018 as compared to the last couple of years. So 3.23, it progressively went up. And then 2021 went down a little bit, but came back up. And it has been pretty high. 2022, interestingly, was the highest score. One of the things that we had asked, we added a special question to the survey during the pandemic about how employees felt that their employer has responded uh, to the pandemic, to meeting their needs. And employers receive some valuable input there. And for the most part, people felt pretty positive about the support that they received. So 3.42 is a great number going into 2024. This is a nice benchmark or KPI to utilize if you're having your employees take the survey every year to set some goals around either maintaining or trying to increase your ENPS score.
And people may notice that when we did the categories of scores, those were a 1 to 5 scale versus this is a 1 to 4. And I think the methodology behind that, we really wanted to force employees to either choose like the 2 or the 3 versus like if we did 1 to 5, you get stuck in a 3 and just take the easy road out. So we really try to force people in one way or another.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's that central tendency bias that sometimes people have. So that covers the quantitative questions. And now we had 2 open-ended questions for which employees could provide verbatim responses. And this is really interesting. There are a lot of different types of responses that come in for employers. We provide all that verbatim data to our employers who are participating. What we recommend is summarizing or organizing this qualitative data into top themes. So where you're seeing a lot of similar responses, those are areas to really kind of delve into further, either through follow-up solicitation of feedback or input or discussion with your team. Here are some top themes when we look at the total survey population responses. So some things that really kind of came through in this question: what is the top reason you stay in your current job? Number 1, flexibility and autonomy. No surprise. I think, we're hearing this from people who are looking for jobs as well as our employees. And so I think that's just a basic expectation for most employees today, is having some type of flexibility and autonomy in how they do their job. The next theme was belief in the mission, purpose, and values, and having meaning in the work that I'm doing. And, we know that this is a driving motivator for people who are in nonprofit organizations, that mission-driven type work, but it's not isolated just to nonprofit organizations. People in for-profit businesses are really wanting to feel like they're making a difference and having impact. So that came through. Another one is the people I work with. They're talented, committed. I have a supportive team. That is a retention factor. And this has become a little bit challenging, especially for organizations who have a distributed workforce and a number of people working remotely, and people are having to use technology more to communicate. Makes developing relationships and collaboration a little bit more difficult at times. So really looking at providing meaningful opportunities for people to connect and collaborate is important. The next is the work environment, positive and respectful culture. So, people want to work in an environment where they feel they belong, they feel safe and respected and included. Those are all important things. People want to feel that they have a voice. There's appreciation and respect for differences. So that came through as a top reason. Also, opportunity to do interesting and challenging work, the ability to learn and grow. And that doesn't necessarily mean growing up the ladder, although there is interest in that for many folks. But just generally speaking, people are interested in personal growth and having the opportunities to expand their experience and knowledge and learn new things just as part of the day-to-day work. And lastly, people are choosing to stay in their current job because of respectful and caring leadership. So this includes their direct supervisor. That relationship is very important, as well as the top leaders in the organization who are driving a lot of the decision making for the business and the organization.
Just anecdotally on this, because I've like looked at the data so intimately, because in building all these reports, and it's interesting the wide range of responses we get for this question, because some people just write like a single word or 2 words, and some people write a novel. And what I see time and time again that shows up on this list is flexibility. Some people just literally just say the flexibility to do my work. And then the people and the relationships. Those two, I just saw so much repetition around those points, and I think that's why people often stay. What I don't see in this question is anybody saying I stay because of the compensation.
Yeah.
Because they're seeking that.
Right. Well, and you'll see on the next question, that's where it does show up.
You're right.
So the next question was, what is one thing, right? If you had to narrow it down to one thing that your employer can do that would make the biggest difference in your satisfaction and performance, what would that be? So similar to the other question, top reason that you stay, this is really going to vary based on the individual employer and the employee's experience. But again, we were looking at what were those top themes that came through from the collective population. Very obvious was improved compensation, and people were noting to be fair and competitive. And in my experience working with employers, it may be that the compensation is fair, competitive, but there's not enough transparency around how communication is determined with employees. And so, when in the absence of having information, people are going online and doing searches or talking to their friends, and they're hearing about what people are getting paid in certain jobs, and it's not always an exact apples to apples comparison with their job and their employer in terms of industry size, revenue, all of those things. Those are the important compensable factors that go into compensation methodology. So, some of this, I believe, has to do with just having a clear, communicated methodology and a process for how compensation is reviewed and determined, so that employees know, okay, there is some objectivity and a proven process behind this. There also may be clearly too some disparities with how people are being paid. Certainly when the job market became really volatile and competitive a year and a half ago, and retention was a top concern for employers, and recruiting. There was a ton of jobs posted, and employers were hiring. They were having to pay maybe higher compensation or salaries to people coming in, and then that threw off. It's called pay compression. It threw off some of the internal equity for existing employees in those positions. And so employers ideally have a plan and a process for right sizing that to improve some of that internal equity. So these are all important things to pay attention to for really any employer. The other thing employees said would make the biggest difference are more opportunities for learning, career, and pay advancement. So we know that personal development, professional development is important for people, but along the lines of compensation as well, people are wanting to know, okay, what are my opportunities, not only to broaden my knowledge, skill, and experience, but also make more money, right? Move up into a role that pays more. We also had this comment. There were a lot of comments with the word listen in it, and I found that very interesting. I know this to be true in terms of the leadership development work that I do. But this seemed to come up more clearly or loudly in the 2023 results than past. But a lot of comments around listen to employees, enforce the same standards for all, and communicate more about what is happening within the organization. So more transparency in terms of communication from leaders. And then there was some additional comments around more communication from the top, like where's the organization heading? Like, can I get excited about the plan and the future for our business or organization? And what's my part in helping us get there? And then lastly, more frequent feedback and check-ins with my manager. So those are all potential opportunities for employers. So when we look at the survey as a whole, here are some takeaways for employers. And certainly, as we mentioned before, employers who received their own report for their organization, they will have their own unique takeaways. But as a whole, recommendations are these three. Maintain regular dialogue with employees to understand what they need to be successful and committed to your organization. So this can be done in many ways. And I would encourage employers to implement a couple different ways of maintaining this dialogue. So one example is, frequent and meaningful check-ins between employee and supervisor. So that includes a focus on progress with the work, but also just how employees are feeling. What are those, aspects of their job that are going well for them? What are their top frustrators or detractors? And how can the supervisor or the organization better support that employee? Another example of regular dialogue could be doing short pulse surveys throughout the year, just to check in and see how employees are feeling about their job. And then certainly a participation in a survey like the What People Want from Work once a year can serve as another data point. Some employers also look at doing focus groups and other ways of connecting with their employees. The key is taking some steps to build that safety around dialogue, and also making sure that this next one, you're taking action based on the feedback that you received. So this is a great way to build engagement and trust with people, is not only asking for their input in a couple different ways, but also acknowledging it and taking some action. And while you may not be able to, address every request or concern, looking for opportunities for short-term or even longer-term strategies and actions to improve engagement in your organization. And you can only do so much at one time. So, if it feels overwhelming, it can be helpful to really look at, okay, what are those top retention strategies and biggest returns on our investment? So when we think about our key employees, our top talent, those people who are critical to our organization, high performing, highly committed, and the retention risk of those folks, right? What might be one or two things we can do to secure them to our organization can be a way to prioritize your efforts.
Okay, we got a little bit of time left, so we'll open it up for Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A. Suzi, I wanted to pose a question for you because I get this a lot. Like when we send out these reports, these individual reports, usually it's a leader, or it could be the HR professional that usually signs up, and that's the main contact for this particular survey. And often they ask, like, what should we do with this next? And I think there is a methodology and a process behind this. What's your take? Like if somebody's asking you, hey, what should I do with the survey next? Like how would you structure it in terms of somebody, you're whether
Mhm.
it's your leadership team getting together and then you eventually communicate it out, like what would you do?
Yes. So the most important thing is to feedback a summary of results to your organization. If you are going to ask for people's input, um, they are trusting you enough to be honest, even though this survey is anonymous, they're putting time and energy and hoping that their feedback is going to be utilized in some way. So, a great way to actually engage and build trust is by sharing a summary of the results. Now, even though you will receive detailed data from your survey report, you will probably want to summarize. So create a high level summary and organize, like I said earlier, that those qualitative responses into top themes when you're reporting it back to your employees. And you can do that in an all team meeting if you have those. It is nice if you can get people together and do it in a live meeting as opposed to just sending it out via an email. You may choose to review the data and the summary of results with the leadership group before you roll it out to the broader employee group to see if they have any input. And I think following back up with maybe one or two action items that you're taking as a result of the summarized results is helpful.
Another question for you, Suze, is, with those top three, basically the last 5 years, we've had those top three, the compensation, flexibility, positive relationships. Based on where you're seeing the economy going, the needs of people, can you make some predictions about those changing or anything being important that's outside of those?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to change. Interestingly,
Yeah.
I think compensation, they're important. They're evolving
Yeah.
and they're important for even different reasons now. I think compensation is it's important now because people are a lot of people are struggling financially. Um, I also think that there is a lot of emphasis on pay transparency and pay equity. And so even if employers are not required to share their pay ranges in their job postings, for example, I think it's going to become a key factor in engaging with prospective employees and also demonstrating equity within your organization. So I would recommend that employers uh, look to formalize their compensation processes and consider how they can build a plan for pay transparency and maybe it's a gradual phased approach for how they're going to communicate about compensation, but I think that's going to continue to be um, a focus area and important to employees. There was some interesting data in a survey, ZipRecruiter survey, that I saw recently where candidates, applicants that were looking for employment um, were more motivated to apply to organizations who posted their compensation. So I think that is going to continue to be a factor. And then flexibility. It's interesting. We swung really far towards the remote work and allowing people to work in different states and locations. And there are challenges, business and operational challenges, and also workplace culture challenges associated with that. I'm seeing it shifting back. So employers, even smaller employers, are starting to try and, well, not even try, they are pulling people back into the office. So I think that pendulum might swing back a little bit, but still in positions and organizations that have the ability to offer remote work, I think that will still exist and be a priority.
We got another question about how do we sign up for this survey if we want to do it next year. We're going to run this 2024, it's going to be probably summertime, early summer. We'll probably start announcing it. So there's not the ability to sign up yet. However, after this session, I will add a form there. So if you want to get early access, just to sign up, I'll follow up with an email with this recording, the slides, and the link to that sign up form, so you can get a head start on signing up for next year's survey. And it looks like we have no other questions. Any other anecdotal comments you want to make, Suzi, before we end the webinar?
Not necessarily. I guess as someone who has overseen HR in our organization, I find this survey to be really helpful. So as we look at planning out our strategic initiatives for the following year, this data has been really helpful in prioritizing those engagement and talent management initiatives. So, it's free. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's a proven survey. It's administered for employers, and it provides really good data. So that's just my plug. And I'm someone who obviously, provides consulting to clients, but also I've utilized the survey internally as a people leader. So
yeah,
I think information is great to have, right?
Knowledge is power.
Yes, knowledge is power.
Yeah. Well, Suzi, thank you so much for presenting on this data. It's really valuable. Hope everybody got some good insights. If you want to learn more about Xenium, follow us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We've got a ton of content on YouTube. Suzi puts out some awesome videos there. Lots of role plays and other micro learning there, and then blog, podcast, and all the webinars that we've done over the years. Feel free to go to our website and get those for free. All right. Thanks for joining today, and have a great rest of your day.